satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth. Yeah, welcome to Satellite Haiku. I'm Sean.
I'm Milo. And today's a pretty crazy day for us. It's super windy and cold and overcast. And I drove my wife to work and there was just traffic everywhere, like weird backups, like for 5-10 minutes to get through any intersection. And we looked and there were 4 serious accidents, like all within 1 mile of our house, like the highway.
Wow.
And it's weird. I'm not sure what's going on there, but
There were a couple accidents here yesterday, too, when I was driving the kids to school and when I was picking them up. And they were in weird locations, like weird residential streets where you just don't expect anything more than like a little tiny fender bender, like at a 4-way stop sign. But like a car was flipped over at a 4-way stop sign.
I was just about to say, so years and years ago, near like Campbell, near Yoga Oasis in the north part of Tucson, there's a little street that's called Glen, and it's like every 2 blocks there's a stop sign. And a lot of them are 4-way stop signs. And it's like a 25-mile-an-hour street. And I remember turning right and then seeing a car flipped on its roof. And I was like, how do you even get going fast enough?
Right.
And what
exactly.
It's like if you had a ramp and you were like in the Fall Guy or something, maybe they could flip it over, but I didn't understand how they got on their roof. Like, what did they do?
I will say a couple weeks ago, there is a 4-way stop sign right near my house, and it's at the crest of a hill.
Yeah.
So our street is like kind of rides, like our nearest cross street goes across the top of a hill. And the cross street, I was driving home with my daughter, and just as we arrived at that stop sign from the other direction, like we couldn't see, the other side of the hill, but a car like launched itself in the opposite direction at us, like coming the other way up the hill.
Wow, like it was going so fast it got air?
It got a little bit of air when it crested the hill, and it just went through that stop sign at like probably 100 miles an hour or 80 miles an hour anyway. And it was terrifying because you think like if somebody, because this is people walk around the neighborhood with their kids and their dogs, like like that car could not see what was in front of it at the stop sign at the crest of the hill, right? Yeah. So it just blew. And I just thought of all the times that I've crossed that street or I've stopped for like a mom with a stroller and a dog crossing that street, and just like, man, it's just ooh.
So, but you know that I know that spot you're talking about at the crest of the hill. Here's a theory I have that is going to change. I remember as a kid growing up, I was probably like 14, 15, like dying to be a driver, and I remember one of our family friends, this guy James Wiggins, he was talking about how some companies would put a governor on their trucks so that their truck drivers couldn't go over the speed limit, right?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, that seems like a practical way to solve that problem. And then they have the sign that says, "How's my driving?" with the phone number so you could report on them. But I remember I just took a test drive. My wife was trying to buy a new car, and we looked at some EVs, and we got in it was a Volvo, it was like a family car, but it went from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Like it was so...
Yeah, the EVs are really zippy. They don't have a transmission. They're really responsive to the throttle.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I feel like that what will happen is this is like the Wild West at the beginning of the EV kind of... people are starting to acquire them and use them. And I feel like at some point there's going to be a law passed that says they can't go that fast. Because imagine like a teenage kid in your neighborhood, like that section of street to get up to 100, you could only really do that in an EV because
oh yeah, totally.
It's so
I mean,
short.
I don't know if you heard about the teenagers that died in the Cybertruck, over Christmas break, or college age kids. I want to say there were 4 or 5 in the Cybertruck, and I mean, they speculate that it was basically that was the situation, that they were trying to basically just accelerate super fast. They ended up hitting it was a 1-car accident, and they just hit like a parked car or a tree or something.
Oh, wow.
And then they couldn't get out of the car. It burst into flames, and it it locked them in, as you hear sometimes. These EVs, when they do catch on fire, they burn super hot, and they burn really fast. Nasty. Because the way batteries burn. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because I mean, I've never owned an EV, especially not a Tesla, but I hear about people getting locked inside. What is that about? Is it?
I mean, I think the risk is the same with any car when the power, but I do hear that Teslas, because they are, they're trying to do a lot of things that are smart, and pretty much everything you do is on the screen in a Tesla.
Oh, okay.
Like they have really, in Teslas in particular, they've really reduced the number of things that operate mechanically or can operate mechanically. And they have to use like software, an interface to do so many things in the Tesla. So I have heard stories of Teslas being particularly prone to people getting lost. Like there have been more benign stories, like, and a little bit comical, like people whose Teslas just stopped on the freeway, like just, like just stopped and wouldn't drive any further. And then the person couldn't do anything, like was just trapped in their car in the freeway lane. And, I guess that can be dangerous, but during commuting hours, like there's so much traffic that you're not going to get hit hard from behind. Wow. At the worst, you'll cause like a pile up behind you where 7 people get in fender benders because they're trying to avoid you. But yeah, so I've heard a couple stories of people. I think Teslas in particular seem prone to locking people inside, but you do hear it sometimes with other cars, and they have like, there's devices for breaking windows and whatnot for that situation if you drove into a lake or whatever. Yeah.
I've seen those on prepper channels. They always advertise this. My wife's car, so she has a 2003 Toyota Matrix. I'm 2003. That's old.
That's Toyota. Go Toyota.
Yeah, and she bought a new car.
This episode brought to you by Toyota.
Toyota. But we parked it down the street, in our little neighborhood, and it was a little bit too close to one. It was like we were taking up a space and a half. So our neighbors asked us to move it back like 4 feet, because it's just parked there waiting to sell it, and. I went down there with the key, and the battery had died because we haven't driven it for like 4 months or something. And I flipped the key, and battery was dead. And I went to put it in neutral to just roll it back, and you can't put it in neutral if the battery's dead.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah. Same with our Subaru. A 2011 Subaru has like a parking brake that is operated by the battery, and you can't release the parking brake if the battery's dead.
That's just,
and you can't change the gears if the battery, even if you don't apply the parking brake, you can't put it in neutral. You can't move the shifter if the car's dead. Yeah, I don't know. That seems crazy.
It seems
total
weird.
Pain in the ass.
Yeah, like I'm gonna have to jump it. I actually had to jump it just so that I could put it in neutral and roll it back with my legs. Like I pushed it back.
I've gone through that with our Subaru so many times because it's got like the new cars have LED lights, right? Like not just the headlights, but the interior lights and everything.
Yeah.
And so a tiny little LED bulb in the interior is not going to waste. You could probably leave it on for 2 weeks and you're not going to drain the battery.
Sure.
In our car, if somebody like accidentally, like our kids will play with the interior light when they were little.
Yeah.
And they would leave it on and I wouldn't know that it was on, and then the battery would die. And so I went through that I went through so many dead batteries with the Subaru because a kid left a light on inside the car.
It's funny what we do.
I mean, that's the only thing that I can think that the reason why it would be on. Yeah.
I had this, I had a Volkswagen van. The Volkswagen van, the year that they moved the engine from the back to the front, and I've on Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers, they used to say like, never buy a car the first year they make a big change because they just it'll be a lemon the whole time, right? So this car was just a complete lemon. Like at 27,000 miles, I bought it used. The third gear just burned out. So like, it just didn't work anymore. And they wanted like 11 grand to replace it or something. Anyway, so this car had a short in first of all, the computer behind the dashboard stuff. Like if they talk about a Tesla, but it was like they had used innovatively a computer. This was in the late 90s. A computer to control like gas, electric, all the gauges. And the computer, like the motherboard, like cracked and something went wrong. And so the gas gauge never worked. And they were like, when I bought it, they were like, yeah, the gas gauge doesn't work. So just keep track of your miles. And I ran that car out of gas. I think, well, the funny thing was I ran it out of gas twice in one day. Like I was like, wait, let me.
Well, those are times in our lives where you bought like $3 of gas at one time because that's the kind of money we had, right?
Well,
so yeah, it's totally plausible that you'd run out of gas twice in one day because you're like, I need gas, and then you go to the gas station, you're like, what do I have? I have
it was
$4.
expensive, and so I was on my way. I was taking the kids to school, and we would go on back streets. And I ran out of gas on the back streets. And luckily, there was a woman right behind me who came up and she handed me a gas can and was like, looks like you need this. And I said, oh, wow. And she goes, yeah, this happened to me. She goes, just keep it. Like, it happened to me, like a week ago. And it's so handy to just keep it in your back of your car. So I went and filled up the gas can, which was like 1.5 gallons or something. And then I filled up the car and then I drove around all day long. And then I was on my way to yoga at 5:15. And I go under the 4th Avenue Bridge, which is like under the railroad tracks. And my car started to chug and it made it to the top of the hill. And I made a right and then it completely died. Wow. And so I called AAA and this dude came. It was a giant Volkswagen van, like with, one of those, like you could camp in it, right? And this dude put it on a flatbed truck. He came and put it, like he somehow got it up on the flatbed truck. And we're driving over to, and he just says he had checked all the battery and stuff, and he goes, is there any chance that you could have run out of gas? And I completely forgot that I had run out of gas that morning. Like so much had happened during the day that I was like, damn, man, I ran out of gas 2 times in one day. Like that's a record, wow. Right? That's pretty impressive, right?
That's pretty impressive. It's funny, like, so with the EVs, obviously, I mean, you talked about grinding your gears or like not having third gear, right? Like you don't have a transmission in an EV. Right. You don't have the whole cooling system. Right. You don't have the risk of running out of gas. You don't have oil changes. So it's just a much simpler, the whole thing is much simpler, right? Yeah. And then you have that responsiveness and all that. It's interesting, like there was the whole, do you remember the whole kind of right wing? There was like almost like a script that they were following to diss EVs. Yeah, like it's still. And my brothers would post stuff, and it was like they like one of the sort of the genres of these anti-EV posts was this notion that if you own an EV, you're just virtue signaling, right? Like you're an environmentalist virtue signaler. Mm-hmm. Another genre was like. They would show, like a cobalt mine or something, and they'd be like, EVs are destroying the environment just as much as anything else, right? Like you're not morally, you have no moral high ground because look at the rare metal mining or whatever, which, a fair point, but I mean, it's not that fair unless you compare it to the oil industry. But yeah. But it is kind of funny. And then the other genre here, there were like when there were wildfires, right, in California, there was a weird new kind of genre of anti-EV social media posts that I started to see, which was like, if you have an EV, like how do you escape your house if there's a fire and the power goes out? Like you need to be, I guess, just this idea that you need to be charging it 24/7. Like, your gas car has a battery too. Like, I mean, it's not like. You don't drive home with your EV and then it's like completely dead at night. And then the final one that I loved that was kind of funny was just like this idea that you can't get your EV wet, like it's like a cell phone or something. Huh. Like there would be occasionally a post about like I don't know, just like like kind of like Trump and his whole thing about an EV in the water,
like the sharks, the boat, like, electric boat,
right? Yeah. But then you just like, it's just the level of dumb when you think of like an EV. It's like they have windshield wipers. They're not like decorative. Like you can drive them in the rain. You know what I mean?
Do they mean like do these people go through a puddle really fast and like splash?
That's what like they would post something that would suggest that like the suggestion would be, and I wish I could find an example. I'll try to find one. But like the suggestion would be that you can't drive your EV when it's wet outside, like you can't get it wet, like a cell phone, right? Like you can't, yeah. So then, you just go like, well, I mean, you can wash them, right? Like, and they have windshield wipers, like they're not decorative windshield wipers. Huh. I thought of, I saw a Waymo, by the way, with riding in the rain with no driver, right? And the wipers were going. And I just thought, and it was empty. It's an empty car driving around town in the rain. And I just thought, that's kind of funny. Like, what's the purpose of windshield wipers wiping when there's nobody in the car to see out the window?
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? It made me think of like, you could do like a Texan style, like say like, you're about as useful as wipers on a Waymo.
That's really good, man. So I had this, when I bought my, two thoughts, when I bought a Ford Escape hybrid in 2006. So it was kind of like early on when like the Prius was the only real option. And then Ford actually, they licensed the Prius high drivetrain. Like they didn't want to build their own and figure it out. So anyway, so I had it and people would always say to me, where do you plug it in? And I would say, it's a hybrid. And they'd be like, what? And I'd say, well, I put gas in it. And they just did. It was like, almost like they were like offended that I was like trying to explain to them that it was what it was, you know, that there was electricity somewhere. And then this one of my neighbors was like, I've heard that those are killing firemen. Like if there's a crash and they're using the jaws of life, they'll get electrocuted. So anyway, and I was like, is that true?
Dumb.
So actually, I actually found this essay by a fire chief in Texas who wrote like a sort of satirical thing about the combustion engine. Basically, he was describing, he's like, and they want to put this highly flammable liquid like into the car, like and carry it around. And if someone hit it from the side, like it could explode, like a dynamite stick, you know. And the way he wrote it was so fun. And like then I asked a fireman in town, and they goes, Dad, there's a giant kill switch that we just flick it off before we work on the car. Like it's just a big red switch on the battery. It's like it's much safer than a gas car. Like, you know what I mean? Like if there's gas spilling out of a car in a crash, like. Anyway, so the second thought that I had was, it was a bunch of years ago, but do you remember how Linux was really, when it was an open source project it became really kind of a popular idea that you could sort of open source build some real thing, like an operating system using people. So I remember asking some of my engineering friends or product design people, and I said, what if we made an electric car, an open source, because like they described how a skateboard model, so you need like a flat board with the batteries can be flat, you know, stacked on it. And then it has 4 electric motors, and then it has electric steering. Right, and brake, obviously brakes, but all of those components, they're really just think of a skateboard. And then you could put different frames, like you could put like a El Camino sort of frame, or you could put a sedan or a hatchback. And imagine if you could do you remember Red Hat? It was like a Linux software company, but you could they would basically provide business services that you'd pay for that sat on top of the Linux kernel code. So I was like, in some ways the open source could be the skateboard where we do all of the sort of design, and then car companies could sort of bid to produce your custom, you know,
I mean, that's kind of where Tesla was going originally. They were licensing their battery tech and all that for a while. Yeah.
But the thought was, back when General Motors was first coming up against Henry Ford, the Model T was black, and the idea was make it so cheap and do nothing like different. Like everything was the same, and then the whole to reduce the cost of the car. And General Motors came along and said, what if we had basically the same skateboard body in the engine, but we put 3 different colors per year and 3 different models? You know, like you had like a sporty model, a family model, and a pickup truck model. And people will pay like 13 or 21% more for that customization. And they were right. I mean, they totally saw that people wanted a little more than a black Model T.
Yeah.
And and so I thought like, there's already a precedent for it. I asked people like, how would you get that started?
That's how like the car, like individual cars, they put so many different models on the same chassis. Like they were going to we have a Chevy Bolt, right? And they were going to get rid of the Chevy Bolt and replace it with the Equinox, which is bigger.
Okay.
And the idea was that people don't want the little EVs. They want bigger cars. Americans want bigger cars. Yeah. And so that was their sort of premise. And they thought, well, we're just going to ditch the Bolt. We'll put a number of different, they're going to configure their plants to produce this chassis for the Equinox, but it's also the chassis for like 5 other Chevys, right? And that they just stick on top of the same wheelbase. And the Cadillac, there's like a Cadillac that's on top of the same chassis, right? So similar idea, right?
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
that's how these factories work. In the end, there was a backlash, and people loved the Bolt, and so they kept it. We love our Bolt. It's our 3rd one. And it's funny, like the anti-EV thing, like the whole Tesla Elon Musk craziness has definitely changed the conversation. Like I haven't seen that anti-EV script being followed by right-wingers so much at all. I don't know if I've even seen it because, you know, like how do you say that stuff if you're like an Elon Musk fanboy now, right?
Yeah.
On the right. And, but I will say that even just in the past week, I've become aware of 2 friends that got rid of their Teslas.
Wow.
Because there was one friend I was kind of wondering about because they were very progressive left and bought a Model 3 a few years ago. And I thought, oh man, I bet they feel weird about driving their Tesla around these days. And I went to their house and they have a Rivian truck now. And then somebody else, there was another friend that I learned just recently got rid of their Tesla. And then when I was picking up the kids at school the other day, I overheard several parents talking. One had just replaced their Tesla with the new Honda Prologue, I think it's called. And then the other one, there was another set of parents. And one guy was giving another a hard time, like, "Oh, when are you going to get rid of that Tesla?" And the guy was like, "Oh yeah, I'm planning to get rid of it in a couple weeks. I'm getting a new car." So it does seem anecdotally there does seem to be an interesting, at least here, a pretty just in my little circle of people, there's an obvious wave of people getting rid of their Teslas. I mean, that one friend who has the Rivian truck, he said, "Oh, I had my Tesla towed away the day that he did the Nazi salute."
Oh, wow.
He just like could not drive it anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was out of town last weekend, but there was a giant. I saw photos of a giant Tesla a protest at the Tesla dealership in Tucson.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of like unionists and people just with signs, and they were all protesting Elon Musk. It's certainly a fascinating time. Like I would never have. I could never have predicted this in like 1986 in the middle of the Cold War. You know, like,
No, we live in the weirdest fucking time.
It's so bizarre. And who was it? There's a former NASA engineer who's written a proof to explain that we're actually in a computer simulation.
I don't know. We were talking about that before, but yeah.
Well, that was a philosopher at NYU that was just made up this kind of. He made up the model of like a teenage boy playing like a sim game, and that's us.
Yeah.
But that was more of like a philosopher sort of just making up. This is a guy who's using what's called like the 2-slit theory.
Oh yeah.
Where you look at like particles and when they're observed, they do different things, and it's like nothing happens when they're not being observed. I don't exactly know how it works, but it's kind of a fascinating.
There's like that quantum particles that change their behavior when they're observed. Yeah,
it's
crazy,
pretty crazy, and I remember?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that kind of like goes with that NPC theory. Now, like the NPC thing, that's used as sort of a slur to diss people, like, oh, low IQ people are just NPCs or whatever. But like my NPC theory was just that like it does feel often that so many times there are people that you're around that are kind of not real until you focus on them or engage with them.
No, it's true.
Like they really are just background characters until you actually observe them and put your attention on them. So. And I don't know. It's kind of a I don't have much more of a thought around that. It's something that I had that I thought about at one point, and I had some like it does feel like it's truly the case though. Like some people, I don't know.
Have you seen the film, the documentary My Octopus Teacher, about the octopus? I remember after I watched it, I remember thinking how we often wonder, and it's sort of this romantic idea that like there are or are not aliens or life forms in other places other than the Earth, right? Like maybe in our solar system, probably not, but in other solar systems, there's two theories, like mathematically it's impossible, or mathematically it's very hard to imagine our very unique situation with our like magnetic core and the ability that the fact that our magnetic core protects us from radiation, solar radiation, where that wouldn't happen on other
Like there's so many factors that make the Earth particularly conducive to, like, it's not just the distance from the star,
right?
but the fact that we have a moon that is almost the same size that's orbiting us keeps our orbit really stable in a certain way, and like that moon of that size at that distance is also a really interesting factor.
A big one is just the fact that a lot of carbon-based life forms rely on water, and that our planet has a range that is from solid to liquid to gas. Like we have that temperature range that's consistent, and it doesn't just.
I mean, you can imagine like some extremophile type of life on other planets that doesn't need water. Right.
Right. Or they're silicon-based, they're not carbon-based.
Yeah.
Like that's another way to do it. But anyway, what was the point? We were talking about, what were we talking about just? So my octopus teacher.
Octopus, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I don't want to, spoilers, I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but like her lifespan is very short. Like and in some ways, like the guy who visits her is like a god from Mount Olympus, because he lives forever, and compared to her, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Plus, she's an orphan, and she doesn't have anyone to sort of mentor her or guide her, and she just has all of this epigenetic kind of abilities and skills that came along with the genes. Like that's one amazing thing. So then I remember thinking, like, there's an 11-year-old girl in a small village in Yemen. I'm like a Martian to her. Like we'll never meet, we'll never speak.
Yeah.
She can't speak my language. She doesn't even know what it's like to be, it's like she may as well live on Mars.
Yeah.
And I may as well live on Jupiter for her, because I'm culturally, and just everything about me is so foreign and weird. I may as well be an alien, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of
I mean, and to kind of expand on that, I mean, the thing that makes me think of is just how we become kind of myopic and make these sort of very like root level assumptions about reality based on our own experience. Like you sort of just have like your definition of what is real and what, like just your perception of the world defines what you think reality is. You know what I mean? Because like we talked about this in the context of like a honeybee can see on the infrared spectrum, right? So like you sort of think of light and colors in a certain way, but it's really just your human way of seeing light and color. It's super limited, right? And so we talk about color, and we have all this sort of language around what color is and what the different colors are and how colors relate to each other and how they blend and how they interact, and colors of light versus colors of pigment and things like that, right? But like all of that is really like, sort of rests on a very particular narrow perception of color. And you could kind of think about that girl in Yemen, and, whether it's family or money or politics or whatever the thing is that you sort of have almost like a root level set of default assumptions about, that you don't even know that you're assuming those things. Like she has a completely foreign set of experiences and therefore kind of assumptions about what constitutes reality. Kind of interesting. So yeah, it truly is like an alien. But just on that note of the octopus, like I remember learning it. I don't think it was on that documentary, but it was somewhere around that same time, being reminded that the octopus, just on the evolutionary kind of branching of species on the planet, like the octopus kind of exists on its own weird branch. So there are people that are like, maybe, something alien truly did land on this planet and kind of like trigger that weird branch. Because humans and all, mammals and their most intelligent kind of quote unquote sort of, not sentient species are on kind of our branch. But the octopus is an extremely sentient species that is super unique in its branch in terms of its sentience. So it's kind of, and how its sort of brain works and all that, right? Like
The 2,000 nodes. It's distributed. Its cerebral capacity is distributed across 2,000 nodes.
And there's really nothing else like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've heard, biologists, sort of playfully speculate about the idea that the octopus might be sort of some alien species,
that crash landed here.
That crash landed here, or that it may have been somehow, that whatever caused that weird branching that put the octopus in its sort of very like unique separate branch of species. Because if you have like the genus species, right? Like the what do you call it? Not the ontology. What's that tree that like?
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know the specific term.
Anyway, so like if you go all the way up to the order, was it kingdom, phylum, kingdom, order, whatever the first parts of it are, the octopus branches off really
early, right?
Really early, yeah.
So I remember walking with my coworkers. I used to work up at this office campus that had 12 buildings, and it was in the desert. So like, I mean, I would go running, and it was like I couldn't see any cars or buildings. It was really in the desert. And so we were walking over to one of the buildings, and a road runner comes flying across.
Oh, I used to love seeing those in Tucson.
Yeah, it could run without even breaking its stride across varied terrain. And on the path in front of us, there was a lizard. And it never even slowed down. It just picked the lizard up and ran off with it in its mouth.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, like, if you dial it in as a species and you just are really good at being you, like really good at being a roadrunner, there's no like pressure to evolve, like to get more complex. Because like it's just so good at it can just whoom, and it's like it's dialed it in, it's got it can do the lizard whenever it wants. Yeah. And it doesn't, like we were like these skinny, hairless things with no claws, and we had a big brain, and so we needed to acquire a lot of calories. And so we were sort of in this weird position where we needed to get more complex and smarter to make tools, or we would just be wiped out, right?
The biggest bummer is we can't fly.
Yeah, that is a bummer. It is true. But back to the octopus, like I think like you could, it's almost like you could, if you gave the octopus an iPad and like access to a large language model, like you almost feel like it
could figure it out,
dominate the entire, like it would become like the dominant species, but it doesn't seem to care. Like it just,
there's like a science guy that my kids watch. Can't remember. I'll put this in the show notes as well. But one of the things, he did a series of episodes where he created increasingly elaborate mazes for this octopus. So he had a captive octopus, and then he just wanted to kind of like test the limits of its sort of like ability to solve problems. And he created insane mazes where it had to, at some certain points, it had to climb out of a tank and cross like dry spaces and then climb back into a different tank.
Wow.
It was nuts. Like it's on YouTube. There's some really cool stuff that he had done to kind of like, he was like, well, the octopus solved that problem. I'm gonna up the ante, right? And he kept like the obstacles he created for this octopus were just nuts and what it could solve. So yeah, I totally agree with you. If you gave an octopus like access to, advanced technology, I'd be a little, be like would be Planet of the Apes, but with octopuses. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other
octopus. I don't even know the plural. Octopuses.
I think it's
they're smarter. They're smarter than me.
Octopi. But the other thing I thought
maybe it's fifth declension Latin and it's octopus.
Octopus could be. Yeah, you studied Latin probably more than I did. I didn't.
Syllabus and syllabus. That's the plural of syllabus.
It's not syllabi. I always say syllabi.
No, it's a fifth declension noun.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know what that means, but yeah. I was denied that in my school because I went to public school for some of the time, most of the time. But back to the fact, one of the amazing things remember when we were talking about parenting and nature versus nurture? Well, what's fascinating is the octopus is born alone its mother dies in order to give birth to the eggs, or give it fertilize the eggs, and the father disappears, and so it doesn't have any mentorship. It basically is just like alone in the world, and all of its abilities come through epigenetically, like its ability to, how they can use tools and they can hide and they can change color, like all of this.
They just learn all that stuff.
I think they already know it. Like, I think it's like they don't learn.
Well, that's not,
each one doesn't like acquire that. It's like it's neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
It's not like an infant child, a human child who is like a blank slate and has to like learn how to.
Well, that's what I mean by epigenetic. So like it has to develop those genes during its life. That's what the epigenetic means, right? Doesn't it?
No,
It doesn't. It means not inherited, right?
No, epigenetic just is like, so we have like, think of the, think you've got like a motherboard that is maybe like hard-coded genes that build you, like a set of genes that are just like foundational, like kernel code. And by the way, it was a ROM chip, read-only memory on the motherboard? The ROM chip. So we've got like this ROM chip that.
So go back and listen to our previous episode if you don't know what Milo's talking about.
Yeah, I thought it was the PRAM, but it
was the conversation.
The ROM chip, anyway. read-only memory instead of random access. But no,
that's my audible footnote.
So then the epigenetic genes are like those genes that allow us, like the simplest one to understand is the famine gene. So people that live in the Middle East and in like southwest, the U.S., Hopi tribes, people, Navajo, they have a higher degree of diabetes because that area was so prone to famine that they needed to be able to turn on a gene. Let's say you're in your mother's in utero and your mother's starving. So then you flip a gene on that says, whenever you encounter any calories, store them. And that's the famine gene. And it's a survival
Right, but
gene.
these are genes that are triggered or like activated during our lives or not.
And typically they are activated in utero based on the conditions or the cortisol levels of the mom. And so like you're basically taking this sort of the ROM chip of how to build a person, and then there's all these variables that can change based on conditions. And so that's sort of one of our sort of tricks as humans, is we were able to not be hard-coded. Because imagine if you came in the skinny, non-famine gene person, and then there was a famine, you would all die, and then that's it. Right. So to be able to flip the gene on and survive, and there's a lot of downsides to the famine gene, obviously. There's a higher incidence of, and a lot of this one study came out of that 6-week ice storm in Quebec. So children that were in utero during the ice storm, their mothers experienced 6 weeks of darkness, cold, and uncertainty. And that cohort of children has a much higher incidence of autoimmune disease, obesity, depression, all of these bad factors. And the only real, correlative kind of, the theory is that their mothers bathed them in cortisol, like stress hormones, that told them, you need to survive a terrible event when you are born, So back to
tie that back to the octopus.
Yeah. So what's interesting about the octopus is I feel like think of, and it's easier to compare like a human child, whose neuroplasticity is so wide open and it really can't even see. Like it has to learn how to see, walk, basically it can breathe, and it's hard, like it has its autonomic nervous system works, but that's about it. Whereas the octopus is born and it can immediately do like fantastical things, like change color to look like the color of a rock. Like it didn't learn how to do that. Like it just could, and it knew, it just instinctually changed color. That's a phenomenal, like coding, like accomplishment in a way, don't you think? Genetically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you remember the story of the octopus and the shark at the aquarium where the sharks kept dying?
No.
So there was an aquarium, I can't remember where it was, but they had this giant, one of the giant sort of exhibits that had a lot of different species in it. And sharks, they would they would have a shark. That was one of their sort of like most popular kind of, people would come to see this because they wanted to look at the shark, right? And so they have the shark, and then the shark died. And then they were like, oh crap, the shark died. So they acquired a new shark and they put it in the tank, and that one died. And they were like, what is going on? Why do these sharks keep dying? And so they set up some cameras, and what they saw was these sharks would circle around, and there was a big giant octopus in this tank, and it just was like annoyed by the sharks. So like the shark would sort of like circle above the octopus, like pass by. And then like at one point the octopus would just sort of like reach out and just grab the shark and just hold it there so that it couldn't.
It has to move forward.
Like it has to move forward to breathe, right? So it would just hold the shark and prevent it from going. And then it would die, and then the octopus would kind of let it go. It was just like, and it wasn't trying to eat the shark. It was just like, I fucking hate that shark, man. Like I'm trying to chill out here, and that shark is just going and going and going and going. God damn it. And then just, reached out
and you
put
wonder,
the brakes.
You wondered if it knew that was a way to kill the shark, or if it just out of irritation, it just grabbed
It's just like,
Stop.
I want some stillness.
Stop going around.
Like, stop moving, man. Yeah,
Wow,
just like put the brakes on the shark. And
That's
then,
an amazing story. Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those big giant octopuses. Yeah, I'll have to find the story. It's another one of those things that I can put in the show notes.
Back to My Octopus Teacher, which I just simply adored that film. And one of the things was I grew up, my uncle.
That guy seems like he has the best life ever, the dude in that film.
Yeah, I mean, he does agree. He does admit that he went to stay there on the beach in that area, that really wild area, because he was super burned out and depressed. Like he couldn't function, and so I don't really know his whole story, but he
was on Tim Ferriss. It's a pretty interesting interview. It's one of the more interesting ones. Yeah.
Two of the things that sort of, like, that's one of those sort of sleeper films that people are like, it's about an octopus, and people are like, yeah, and then you say like, but the dude developed the ability to stay down though with the octopus for 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the cinematographer, this woman that shot the film, she could do it for 8 minutes.
That's crazy.
I just can't, I can't, like, I can hold my breath under for maybe like 2 minutes or something, but like, I like can't move and I'm struggling.
This is like,
they're like,
what? Like, what's his name? David Blaine. Remember when he learned, like, so he does those like human endurance type of, it's not magic tricks. But like he does, in addition to his street magic and stuff, he does those sort of human endurance things. And one of them was breath hold. He wanted to be in a tank and he wanted to kind of just be underwater for sort of an insane amount of time. And so he learned to hold his breath for minutes. And at one point he was briefly the world record holder. And it was 11. It's been crushed now, his record, but this was not that long ago that he held the record, and it was like 11 minutes and 40 seconds or something like that. It was somewhere around 11, just shy of 12 minutes. And he did it on the Oprah show, and he has some interesting, he talks about that, and it's interesting, like how he talks about like the conditions weren't quite right on the Oprah show, and like he had to move more than he had practiced because like he had learned to keep his body very still so that it would use like the minimum amount of energy and stuff. So that's another crazy thing when you think of the octopus teacher guy and 12 minutes moving around, exerting himself underwater.
Interacting and developing a relationship with the octopus. Yeah. Like he had to like receive things and they had to exchange. They were having a relationship while he's holding his breath only.
Yeah. For so long. I mean, minutes. I mean, longer than what used to be the world record.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you're right. Like, and it was. He said part of the way that thing that made it very sort of not, I mean, easy, but allowed him to do it quickly was that it was 55 degrees. Yeah. And he said that he started wearing wetsuits and weights, but then he just acclimated to it, so he could go down there and. 55. That's the cold tub, like in Bernard.
Yeah,
like that.
Like Wim Hof, man, like Wim Hof in those crazy like underwater.
Yeah. Crazy. And he said after a while he started to he became almost like addicted to it, where he would crave the feeling of being so cold in the water. And it just was like very kind of purifying and just was a really wonderful experience for him. But what an amazing film, and also just the idea that it's. That her lifespan is so short. So much happens in this tiny little span of... Yeah. And part of me thinks like, if we were to take timelines, like, I recently heard someone, they did an ice core that goes back 66 million years, which is relatively short for the planet. Like it's not like there was like a period where it was just like molten lava for millions and millions, billions of years, right? And then it got into the millions. And so 66 million years ago, but humans really, we've only been around for like 100,000 years, you know? And the dinosaurs I recently read, they were 6 million years ago. I always think of like the dinosaurs like butting up against the end of like the Ice Age killed them off, and then like humans were like around and saw woolly mammoths and stuff, which I guess they did.
Yeah.
But it's
I hear that there's that thing I've heard, which is that the distance between the Tyrannosaurus Rex and us is shorter than the distance between the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Stegosaurus, like time-wise.
oh wow,
Like there was more time elapsed between when the Stegosaurus was around and the Tyrannosaurus came
yeah,
than has elapsed between the Tyrannosaurus and us.
that's
that
wild.
crazy?
That's hard to imagine. Really hard to imagine.
Like the dinosaurs were around for so long. Yeah.
And you know, so one of the things that's interesting is when we think like let's say I think I read that our life, the human lifespan has become like around, I think it's 78 years for men or 81 for women or something, the average, you know.
Yeah.
So on average, we think of that as like a human life, and that's everything that is important to us pertains to like being alive for that amount of those 8 decades, right? Which is relatively short, right? And then we have a historical record for, you know, we kind of think back over history and we look ahead to the future. But imagine if there was another being from another planet whose lifespan, unlike the opposite of the octopus, was like, you know, 2 light years long. Like they live, then we would just be like this blip to them.
There's a short story from the perspective of a tree witnessing a car accident that's like that, because the tree is around for a few hundred years. And it's like by the side of the road at one point of its life, and it witnesses a car, like the tree. It's the tree kind of seeing a car accident. That's basically the story. And so it's exactly that. It's from the tree's perspective, this is nothing. Like this is such a blip.
Right.
But from the person in the car, it's like the most significant event that's happened in that person's life.
Yeah. My wife, so we just went to San Diego and we went down to the beach. First of all, we drove to this like park that I wanted to access the beach, and it was a sandy cliff, like about 130, 140 feet high. And there was a little cross with a kid's name. He had died in November 2024, 18 years old, just stood on the edge and it collapsed and fell.
Wow.
So we kind of walked down this path and it was super sketchy. And there was a place where I was pretty sure I was going to break my ankle. As soon as we get down to the beach, this dumb way, we look over and there's stairs, like a quarter mile away, like around the bend, but you know, you're like, okay, that's how people can really get down. Anyway, but standing at the ocean is always so humbling, because you just, the ocean is just kind of like, who are you? Like what, you know, you're just,
I remember, this is going to be a bad segue, but I totally agree. Like being next to something that is just dwarfs you, like that ocean or redwood trees or whatever, like being next to a view where you feel tiny is such a powerful feeling. But the terrible segue I was going to introduce was one time when I was living in Arizona. Once in a while in the summer, when it was just unbearably hot, I would drive to San Diego just to be by the cool ocean. And I remember one time making that drive, and the internet didn't exist back then, so I looked up. I don't even remember how we did research back then.
I know, right?
Probably like stone tablets, or like
periodic
word of mouth.
table. Do you remember the periodic table?
We consulted our
What was those green books that had all like the magazines in them?
Oh yeah,
it was like an index of periodicals.
Yeah.
It was like a periodical index. It was so. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. We would consult our elders. You'd have to request a meeting with the elders in the sweat lodge, right, or something.
And
anyway,
the talking stick, like the stick.
Exactly. So I don't know how I found out about which beaches to try to go to or whatever, but I learned about this beach, in La Jolla area, north of San Diego, and or south. I don't remember where La Jolla is related.
It's just north of Mission Beach. Yeah, it's just north of San Diego.
Just north of San Diego, right? Yeah. So it was somewhere around there. So I made that drive in my old Mazda pickup truck, and I arrived, having gone through Bakersfield and the Mojave Desert and all that, and it was amazing. So I park, and I walked, similar to you, I walk like down this crazy steep trail. You know, it felt very, you know, like it was a tough trail to walk down, and a lot of effort to get to the beach, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I arrive at the beach, and like almost no sooner do I get to the beach than there's like, oh, there's a naked dude. Oh, there's another naked dude.
Oh, yeah,
and so it's like it was like 50 naked guys with like the zinc oxide on their dongs. So it was just like a bunch of white dongs walking around. They had zinc oxide on their noses and their dongs.
Wow.
So it's just like I was surrounded by white dongs. And
but they
and
were
the same thing. I looked over and I saw a stair. Like they had all parked in a parking lot and come down some stairs that were just like adjacent to where I had done this like hazardous trail.
It's funny because those people were way ahead of Tucker Carlson on testicle tanning, because they knew that testicle tanning was where it's at, and you know.
Totally. Yeah.
Do you remember? So there was a
He should just be gay. Tucker Carlson. He would have so much more fun it seems like he kind of really wants to just be gay.
Yeah, I don't really get that guy. Like I know I've seen Rachel Maddow used to have a show with him.
Oh yeah,
they were on a show together. Yeah, and he wore a dumb little, what is this called?
He used to wear a bow tie. Yeah, I remember like Jon Stewart making fun of him for his bow tie one time. Yeah.
Yeah, and she said Rachel Maddow has never said anything mean about him. She said he's actually really charismatic. He's really smart and funny, and I never had a problem with him. He never did anything in front of me or on our show that was good. And you know, now
people change though.
They do. I mean, they maybe like I always wondered if Carrie Lake slipped and hit her head in the bathtub, because she was like an Obama pro Obama like, and now she's like.
But there's a lot of these weird like far left to right wing. That's just a strange but not uncommon path that be like Tulsi Gabbard and and Matt Taibbi, the journalist, and Glenn Greenwald, the journalist, and Barry Weiss, the journalist. Like there's a bunch of those. Russell Brand.
Oh yeah,
there's a bunch that were like super far left progressive types that like became kind of freaky, weird right winger types. Yeah.
That is interesting. I wonder if it's an aging thing or.
I would say even my two brothers, even both my brothers.
That's right. They were ultra left. I would have considered both of them in like a very left.
They were hardcore Bernie bros. Yeah.
Yeah. And just
there's a thing that seems to happen. There was a guy. From California, not far from here, and I think he was kicked out of Poland somehow. He had a video that went viral where he was in Poland, of all places, like early in the Ukraine conflict. And he was like, there was a video of him like harassing some brown-skinned people in Poland and telling them to get out of the country, go back to their country. Meanwhile, this guy's from California and he's in Poland telling people to go back to their country. So then there was like a little bit of like internet sleuthing that happened. Like, who is this American guy telling Polish people to go back to their country when he's fucking an immigrant in Poland himself? And turned out he was a hardcore Bernie bro dude, formerly from Petaluma, California, who had been in trouble with the authorities here for putting Nazi pamphlets on people's doors or something in the neighborhood in Petaluma. So like he was another one that was like a hardcore Bernie bro, big time hardcore, very vocal Bernie bro who went Nazi somehow or was a Nazi. I don't know. Who knows what's up with that weird, but it's a thing that people have written about, like the far left to right wing pipeline.
Yeah, no, it is pretty bizarre. And then, did you watch any of the, it's not State of the Union, but it was like a talking to Congress kind of thing?
Fuck no.
Yeah, I mean, I watched some of the clips, like the New York Times put together, like sort of the best, like the greatest hits. And supposedly it was basically a rally. Do you remember? You know, he's just descended into. I was expecting him. I was kind of hoping.
I heard that it was like Kim Jong-un like in terms of like the level of sort of applause he would get for his stuff from the Republicans.
Oh yeah, totally.
It was somebody was saying they looked like they were trying to outdo each other with their level of enthusiasm, as if it was Kim Jong, like it was North Korea style kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, it's true. Like it was a rally, but it was a rally with Congress people there instead of, his followers. But one of the things I was sort of hoping for, and I that my Schadenfreude level is, or desire to experience Schadenfreude is kind of off the charts at this point, because I'm sort of like, hey, So I was hoping that at some point he would just turn to the stage manager and be like, play my favorite playlist, and then you just would sway. I was hoping
do his double jerk off move.
Sway there for 20 minutes, but he talked for 99 minutes.
Yeah,
which is a record. No president has ever talked to Congress for more than 90. And what's crazy is what he's starting to do, which how what you said, he's a very old man. He's starting to do this thing. You've heard him say it in rallies so he's reading off a teleprompter. And he comes to a line that he thinks is especially poignant. The one that was the sort of very dictator line was he was basically criticizing the Democrats for not ever applauding anything he does, right? So he was reading, and then he goes, if I had invented a life-saving drug, if I created a drug that around the world saved the lives of billions of people, those Democrats would not applaud, they would not smile, they would not stand up to honor me. And I was like, wait, where did if he's imagining he invents a life-saving drug, I'm like, where did that come from? What?
I don't know.
What kind of thing?
There was the one clip I heard was him talking about transgenic mice.
Huh.
No, I don't know if you've heard anything about that. So he was bragging about he was bragging about basically ending some program, some science foundation, earmarked money, research money for transgenic, that had to do with transgenic mice. And he called them transgender mice.
Are these?
And so there's been a little bit of, so it's just so fucking dumb. So he reads the word transgenic, or his people do, and they immediately assume this is money for transgender mice, right? But it's transgenic mice, and it's whatever. Anyway, it's a completely different thing. It's kind of like when he talks about immigrants being released from insane asylums.
Right, because he heard the word applying for asylum.
So he doesn't know the difference between asylum, the legal status, and an insane asylum, because he's that fucking stupid.
But that is something for which his supporters love him. They adore that he's not an elite, not a highly educated intellectual. They actually would prefer that has an IQ of 86 than 140.
He's if Michael Scott was an asshole instead of a good-hearted idiot, right? Or more like David Brent, the British Office. That guy was kind of an asshole.
Oh yeah. We were saying how it feels a little bit like Being There, where he's somehow being you look at Mike Johnson behind him and JD Vance, who, if you notice JD Vance, he, for instance, during this speech, one of the congressmen, Al Green from Texas, started shouting something you couldn't hear him because it
was he the one shaking his cane?
Yeah, he's shaking his cane. He's a 72-year-old congressman from Texas, and he's often done been really vocal and loud and protested things. But
yeah, I like that guy. But the shaking the cane thing was a little bit too Grandpa Simpson.
Yeah, he did.
As a visual.
But JD Vance stood up and was like, you be quiet, sir, you silent. And he started he was acting I don't know. And then Mike Johnson read this thing that the order shall be kept in the house at all times. Members shall be removed if they can't maintain order. They did their whole. They loved it. They just were and you knew that Trump, and because remember after Zelensky's meeting in the White House, he turned and he goes, "This is going to be great television."
Yeah,
and I know that for the speech when they removed the guy. Because how he was get him out of there during his early rallies.
He loves the drama.
He loves the drama. He's smiling and his guys come and move the person out, But yeah, it was pretty wild. I told you before.
I couldn't bring myself to watch it.
I didn't watch it live. I watched kind of the best of clips. And honestly, I'm just waiting for him to devolve to where he is dancing on stage and Mike Johnson is just going like this in the back, because what do you?
I mean, we're basically there. It's metaphorical at this point, but it might as well be that.
Yeah, totally. And Elon drove to the speech with Melania and DJT in the limo.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, he's just there all the time. Like, I wonder when that breakup's going to happen. I'm kind of looking forward to it.
I saw Bernie. I think it was Bernie gave a clip of him talking about how, let's just be honest. Like, Elon Musk is the Secretary of Labor, and he's the Secretary of Education, and he's the Secretary of the Treasury. Like, let's just be on. Let's not pretend we have these other cabinet members at this point.
Right, and I
thought that was pretty spot
true.
on.
It is true. And in many ways, like, he has this sort of Rasputin, like, he's unelected. He's just kind of there, and I think he sleeps in an office at the White House.
Yeah,
and doesn't go home. He's just like, I hope
he's
he gets
doing
bored.
all this out of it. It's all altruistic. He's doing all of this out of the goodness, because he doesn't need the money, right? Like, it's all out of the goodness of his heart.
Yeah, no, he doesn't want anyone to invest
which you could say the same for Sheikh MBS in Saudi Arabia. I mean, he doesn't need the money, right? Like, he's doing that all. He's cheeking out of the goodness of his heart, right? Putin too. Putin's extremely wealthy. Everything he does is just it's just patriotic and altruistic, right?
How much money do you think Putin has?
Oh,
more than Elon Musk or less? Like,
I think probably. I don't know. That's a good question. 400 billion is a lot.
The
Louis Vuitton guy is the guy they think is also, like, he's the other one that they say might be the richest. The friend, I forget his name. See, that's what a billionaire at that level should be. They should just be this guy. You're like, I can't remember his name. What's his name?
For a while.
Because basically, like, at that point, you've just basically won capitalism. So just like, you could just be done. Like, just go fucking snort ketamine on your yacht, and that's it. Like,
right?
we don't need you anymore. Like, you won already.
For a while, the richest person in the world do you remember when gas prices were ultra high? My kids were kind of like 11, maybe 8 to 11. And the price of gas went up it was headed towards $6 a gallon, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when, Venezuela was pounding away at being the biggest economy in South America. The richest person in the world was the king of Thailand, which is technically the king of Siam.
Yeah.
Because he owned all the undersea, like north of Australia, there's like all of these oil fields, undersea oil fields, and he has control over the leases of them. Like, he owns the lease of them, like the royal family does.
Yeah.
So when the price of gas was $6 a gallon, all of a sudden his wealth was quadrupled or something. And he had hundreds of billions of dollars. Yeah, I guess it was all, in potential. It was like he had access to these oil fields that hadn't been developed. But
Is
it's
that
interesting.
something that the king of Thailand doesn't own that stuff anymore?
No, I think he does. It's just that the gas prices are so low, like
I see. So that doesn't put them in the top anymore. They don't seem to, when they count like the wealthiest people, they do seem to sort of like exclude people who are just like royal wealth. I don't know.
Well, so here's one thing. The one thing to put put Putin into perspective. So even though Russia has this vast landmass with, 51% of their revenue came from oil, sales of oil products.
Yeah, oil, natural gas. Yeah,
and but their economy was the same size as Italy's. And way behind Mexico. Like, it's like California's it's like, America, China, Germany, California, if you want to do the, pretend. And then like Mexico's way up there. And Putin's like 29th or something. He's able to punch above his weight with such a small GDP. Like, it's incredible. And so I kind of don't believe that he could have, even for 20 years being a kleptocrat, he couldn't really have stolen.
That was the reason I paused about like how whether he's on the 400 billion level or not. Like, I don't know. Like, at that point, it's just academic anyway. Like, what is really the difference between 200 billion and 400 billion, except some pixels on a screen at that point?
True.
Like, you have more money than you could ever do anything with at that point.
Wow. Yeah.
There was a guy talking about. I read a thing recently that was, well, never mind. That's a whole other, I could go down this whole other path. But yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, I think we should do, it's 106. We should do first world problems. Like, any first world problems pop to mind or?
Yeah. So this is maybe a little one, but driving Google Maps directions coming back from the mountains, right? Like on a holiday weekend, coming back from the snow, from like Truckee, California to San Francisco. On a holiday weekend, the return trip always has a ton of traffic because California just has not that many freeways. And so everybody kind of bottlenecks onto these freeways. And so it's like, just to put it in perspective, that drive between Truckee and San Francisco, when there's no traffic, when you just fly, it's like just shy of a 3-hour drive, right? And when they're on a holiday weekend, it's about a 5 to 5.5 to 6 hour drive sometimes because you hit these slowdowns. So Google Maps gets me every time because I'll be there and I'll look at the drive time in the morning when I wake up. I'll go like, well, what, are people already on the road? I'll kind of look and say, well, it's a 3 hour and 10-minute drive. I was like, yeah, so maybe a little bit of a slowdown. And then, like maybe lunchtime, I'll look at it again. It'll say like 3 hours and 20 minutes. Like, oh, that's not too bad, right? So then I'll get on the road and every fucking time it's a 6-hour drive. And I think like, because Google is not like anticipating the traffic that's about to be there.
Yeah, based on past patterns, like it should be able to.
It sees what's on the road and it thinks, oh, this is, but like people are starting the drive at that point and then it slows down like crazy, right? And so like Google should be smart enough to go, all right, we're telling people it's 3 hours and 20 minutes, but we know that that's a crazy over optimistic prediction. They should know that that's a crazy, like they shouldn't trust their own numbers from the way they're calculating them. The algorithm should be able to look at some different inputs and say, all right, this drive is always 5 hours on this day or these days or whatever. That's my first world problem.
I completely agree. And in fact, yesterday I had a meeting at 3 across town. And when I made the meeting the day before, it was probably 11 a.m. for a 3 o'clock meeting, right?
Yeah.
And it said 12 minutes drive time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I get in the car with giving myself 15 minutes and I'm 5 minutes late. Like it's always about 3 to 7 minutes too much longer than it thought it would be. And you're right. It's like, you think that like their ability now, when you look at it like a restaurant and it says like, busier than usual. Like they do that because everyone who has their Google Maps on in their phone, they know who's standing in the restaurant. Like they know all of this data, but how can it not anticipate based on like Tucson traffic patterns?
I mean, shit happens. Like there could be an accident, there could be construction that was unexpected, but it's not that, right? It's just a bad prediction.
Every single time I use Google Maps prediction, it's always
and you feel like a sucker. It's like,
you feel like a sucker.
I fell for it again. I fell for it again.
It's been years, and I keep and you'd think that they would, if they were to look at the logs, they would know how many people arrived late at their meeting, because it even says like text someone you're going to be late because it knows you're going to be late.
I mean, they're getting the traffic data in real time from the speed that people are going.
Yeah,
that's because you can see it on the map. Like, oh, it's red here on this part of the drive.
It's
like,
really interesting.
They know everybody is slowed down. Yeah, so. That's my thing. And so anyway.
So my first world problem was, so my wife's purchased this, and we can, maybe Hyundai would sponsor our thing, but Tucson Hyundai. And I don't
know, we can't have two car companies on this. We just talked about Toyota, and I said I love my Bolt. Now we're talking Hyundai. I don't know. So they can compete for our money.
Both of us. I have a 2006 Ford Escape, which was really high tech at the time because it's a hybrid, and my wife had a 2003 Matrix. So for her, this is like the fanciest computer smart car. So it has really great sensors, and it when you're driving in what's that mode where it takes care of the speed? It does it in
cruise control.
Yeah, but like it has smart cruise control, so
like adaptive cruise control.
Yeah, and it's phenomenal in the sense if you're in the right lane, it will just stick to the car in front of you like glue.
Yeah.
And if someone passes you in the left lane going 90, if you quickly move over, it lets you speed up to your chosen speed. Like it knows, it's smart, right?
Yeah.
But then we're coming through from San Diego, we're coming through that windy mountain pass, and there's terrible wind and like a dust storm. And the wind is like gusty and nasty. And so it has this thing where it tries to keep you in the lane by steering for you.
Oh yeah, I hate that.
So then the wind comes along, and the wind
That thing
pushes
freaks
the
me
car.
out. Our car has that too.
I turned to correct the wind, and it says, "You asshole!" And it tries to. So we're fighting with each other to stay in the lane, and you're like,
That's
"Come
what
on,
I don't like about that. I always feel like I'm fighting with my steering, or I forget to put on my our thing will do it if you want to change lanes on purpose.
Oh,
but you forget to do the turn signal.
Right, it'll go.
Then the car doesn't know you're desiring to change lanes.
Yep.
Because it's like that's an empty road. Like I don't need to do the turn signal. There's nobody behind me.
Yeah,
like
sure.
the turn signal's for other people to see. And if there aren't any people, like, but no, the car says, hey, what are you doing?
That kept happening to me, and my wife goes, "You have to turn. If you turn on the signal, it won't fight you." And I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense." But anyway, so I was fighting it, and I said to my wife, "I was like, can we? I know there's a way to turn it off, but neither of us really have dug through the manual. Like it's not intuitive." And then the other thing that pissed my wife off is it kept saying on the dash, it kept saying time for a coffee break. And she was
like she was tired.
Yeah, I don't know. So then I didn't do it to me. And she goes, "What does it?
What is she doing? That is?
Is it possible that like she's acting like maybe drifting or sliding? Like she seems tired because it's detecting that
what is she
needs
doing
a coffee break?
Yeah,
isn't that weird? And it did it to her like 4 or 5 times. And she's like, "Why me? Like why? How am I driving differently that I need a coffee break and you don't?" And I was.
Could you tell? Was there something you were hiding from her, like, or could you not? Like you weren't able to discern anything.
No. In fact, it did it to me at the very end. It was dark, and it was like we were on between like Yuma and Casa Grande is like the straightest road. I mean, so maybe it's like when you stop adjusting the steering wheel and it thinks you
haven't done anything for a while.
Yeah, maybe that's what it's like.
Where did you go, man?
Because it is steering in the keeping you in the lane. Pretty well, like on the curves, it does a good job, you know. The other thing is when you're trying to pass a truck, you know, on those curvy roads. Yeah. So like you don't really want to get near the truck just in case a gust of wind blows you under it or something. So you kind of
blows the trailer of the truck into your lane or something.
You try to hug the like the shoulder line. And it doesn't want you there, so it's pushing you back into the middle, and you're like, I don't want to be near the truck, and it's like, you're like, no, and you're definitely fighting with the car the whole time you're passing the truck, you know, and it's like, get back in the middle of the lane, and you're like, I don't want to be in the middle of the lane, you know, it's kind of weird. That's my first world problem.
That thing that you talked about where the car said she needed a coffee break, I don't know why it made me think of this, but have you ever been in one of these Google Meets where like suddenly emojis just spontaneously appear on the screen because of like something you did? Like there'll be like thumbs up that just start flying or like hearts or something.
I always thought that was other people delivering them.
Yeah, no, like I've been in meetings with people where nobody did anything and like hearts would explode on this or fireworks.
Look.
Did you do that?
I'm clicking them, yeah.
Oh, okay. Cause sometimes like that shit will just happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then then we're derailed in the meeting trying to figure out like, what did we do that made Google think it needed to throw hearts on the screen? Or what did we say? Did we say something? Then we try to like go back in our minds like, oh, maybe when I said I was excited, was that firework? No.
At the beginning of the pandemic, when we all went online, my coworkers, and a lot of our office was in South San Francisco. So we did a lot of online meetings anyway before that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But once we were all online, we started, like, I had a couple of coworkers who were very playful, and we would do a thing where you could, I think you could mute someone on Google Meeting. Like, but I don't think they might have changed it, but I think you could mute someone.
Yeah, back then you could mute other people. Yeah.
So we would just, in the middle of someone was talking, someone would mute them, and no one knew
like
who did
pranks.
It. Yeah, and then one of our coworkers was showing, she had loaded these Snapchat filters for her Mac.
Yeah.
So she switched the camera to the Snapchat thing, and she picked the banana one. And then the meeting started and she couldn't get it off. And so it was like that.
There's some funny YouTube videos of that where like there was one where a guy was a potato in a really serious meeting.
Well, I think there was a judge who was talking to a judge and he was a cat. And he said, I'm not a cat. I'm not a cat. And
that was another one I saw. The potato one was my favorite because he's like, it is kind of a serious meeting, but he's like, and then he starts making potato jokes that were pretty on point.
That's pretty good. That's pretty funny. Yeah. But I know that, and then the banana woman later was demonstrating. She was in like a one-on-one with our boss.
Yeah.
And he was like, "How did that happen?" And she goes, "Well, let me show you." And she did it. She, like you just pick the camera and it's like Snapchat camera. And then she couldn't, it was a glitch. Like she couldn't turn it off. And so she had to spend the rest of the one-on-one in the banana mode. And he's like, this is really hard to take you seriously when you're talking to me as a banana.
Oh, man.
Perfect.
That's how Trump should have done the speech, as like a banana or a potato. That would have been entertaining.
It's true.
I could watch it like that, I think.
It's true.
I could probably watch it like
that. Someone has put some clips of the meeting, of the speech. They've taken Snapchat filters that make him into a little child. And then his voice is like a 4-year-old, and then his face is really small. And then Mike Johnson is back there.
I saw somebody do a pretty well done clip of the Zelensky meeting in the Oval Office where Rubio and Vance and Trump are all in clown makeup.
Oh yeah, sure.
And that was pretty well done.
There's been a lot of pretty funny ones of those, actually. Yeah. Anyway, we should roll.
Yeah, we should roll.
Yep, it sounds great.
All right, brought to you by Toyota, Hyundai, and Chevy. This episode of Satellite Haiku, brought to you by 3 competing car companies, and
all EV focused though. We're all hybrid EV, plug-in.
Just can't get them wet.
And
all right. So, hit us up at satellitehaiku@gmail.com. Or find us on Substack if you want to comment.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right, dude.
Bye-bye.
Satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.